Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. What's going on, everybody? We are back. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I'm AJ, sitting across from me, holding it down. Jason, how you doing?
Doing great, AJ.
Jason, I was wondering, is there anything that is there anything that you enjoy doing that people may not expect or would be surprised to know that you do? Like, I'll give you my example. Like most people, okay. I talk about how much I screw up on this show enough and how academics is probably not the top of my priority, and I don't read a lot. But one of my favorite things to do is crossword puzzles. I love crossword puzzles. I don't know why.
No, that doesn't surprise me about you at all.
Huh. Okay.
You're a very, very strategy-focused person.
That is true,
Crossword puzzles, they have a lot of that going in there.
Never put that together.
And, I've said it on this show before. I write musical lyrics. Now, hearing my voice, everybody could suppose that I write country lyrics, but I also write rap songs. So yeah. I think that would catch a lot of people off guard that that's a genre I write in.
Yeah, I've heard them. They're good, too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll see. Maybe the world will hear them one day.
Hopefully. Well, on today's episode, we are going to be talking about working while in school. This is something that a lot of students have to do. Some students choose to do. Some students don't necessarily have to do. So we're going to be talking about that today. Does that sound good to you?
Absolutely. That's an important one. I've mentioned on this show before that I worked a lot during school, and that might not have been the best work-life balance where I got the most out of college. But that being said, it's a good topic to talk about and what to expect.
Cool.
Well, before we jump into that, I do want to remind everybody, visit our website, Reschool'd.com. That's Reschool with a D, not an ED. Visit our social media handles on that. We are Reschool'd Pod. And then, of course, on your favorite podcasting apps. Follow us, like us, get notifications when we drop new episodes. And I guess most of all, we want to hear from you guys. Visit our website and send us a message. Let us know the things you want to hear about, because that's how we get fodder for conversation. We want to talk about what you care about. So
absolutely.
Let us know.
Well, let's get into the quick question of the day, and it's dealing with jobs in college while we're in college. Can you give an example or give an experience of the funnest or funniest experience that you had during at a job during college?
Oh, funnest or funniest? All right. I may not should say this one on air, but I'm going to go with this one.
Oh, why not? I've screwed up enough.
Yeah, this one might surprise you a little bit. So, I wasn't a huge partier or anything back in college. It was just I worked so much and things like that. But we did have our late nights. I would be in the restaurant most nights. And afterwards, you get out at so late, you don't have too many places to go. But I think it was, I don't know, maybe a Thursday, one night in the restaurant. We got out and a few of us said, all right, we're going to go downtown, see what's going on. We ended up at a dance club. And we were food and beverage city, so there's a few dance clubs around and stuff like that. And there wasn't many people in there at all. It was kind of dead. We weren't going to stay, but we said, well, we'll hang out for one drink. So we did. We hung around. And about that time, a bachelorette party comes into the bar, into the dance club.
And those are generally fun.
And, oh, yeah, right. It was a big group of them, about 8 girls all together, and they were just having a great time and stuff, and they were out there on the dance floor dancing, but there was nobody out there, right? So they were asking the DJ for songs and things like that, and I go out there and start dancing with some of them. It was actually me and 3 girls that were out, so it was really just me. I was one of the few dudes in the whole bar.
That sounds awful.
Surprising me that the bachelorette party stayed there, right? But anyway, I go out there and I start dancing, and one of the bridesmaids said, you got to dance with the bachelorette, right? You got to make her feel good. And back then I could dance, right? I used to love to dance. And I danced with her a little bit. And I said, well, I can do one better than this. I didn't say this, but I was thinking this. And I did one of the craziest things I've ever done. Pull a chair out on the floor, and I go a full Magic Mike routine on it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I did, right? Even the DJ couldn't believe what was going on. If it had been a packed place, they would have thrown me out. But the girls loved it, right? Like I said, I could dance back then, and I was, worked out pretty hard, so I was pretty fit. And they took pictures. It was a mess. And then we didn't stay much longer, right? The bar closed down. The club closed down. I leave and go back. Now, the next day, Friday night, working in the restaurant, I get there. Show up as soon as I check in, go to the back. The expo's already got a whole bunch of food served up on trays saying, all right, take it out there. We got a big party in the back, that type of thing. So 3 or 4 of us pick up the big tray, and I go and put it down. I can't see anything because I'm carrying this big tray as I make my way to the back of the restaurant.
I can see where this is going.
Oh, yes. That is exactly where it's going. I lay it down, and who is the party we're waiting on? It's not just the bachelorette and her bridesmaids.
Oh, no.
It's the entire family.
Oh,
There's about
no.
40 people. Oh, yeah. And they were passing around the pictures from the night before. And so the uncle has the already developed, I have no idea how they did this already in the day, already developed pictures in his hand.
Oh,
and it's like
boy.
stone silence. And then all of a sudden a bunch of whispering and everybody just starts laughing, right?
Oh, my gosh.
I was so embarrassed. And I had this dialogue. The dad wouldn't even look at me. He just made some smarky comments the entire time. But the uncle, the entire time, just kept ripping on me every time I'd have to come by and fill up some water or whatever it was. So that was easily the funniest, most embarrassing scenario that has ever happened to me, maybe in my life, but certainly while working in college.
That is awesome. No, mine doesn't even come close to that. I feel bad now. No, all mine was we used to joke. So I used to work at a fast food restaurant, and when we would drive, do the drive-through, we would have a frequency for our drive-through. So we had our ears in, and it would go to the little talk box at the drive-through. Well, we found out very quickly that a couple more restaurants around us, fast food restaurants around us, also had the same frequency. And we played on that. So like one time we would sit there, and Zaxby's was across the road, and they had just opened up, and we would look, and it was a very down time. And obviously it was not when we were packed or they were packed, but we saw that they had nobody in line. Nobody was at the driving through, or nobody was parked or anything like that. It was just very downtime. So we started ordering from our headset from them. We would just sit there and go, hello, hello. And they would look out, because, you have that mirror that you can see cars if they're just sitting there. And nothing. There was nothing there. We'd, hello, we'd like to order. And then they would walk outside to see it. Nothing there. And we, hello. And then they would finally, who is this? And we just started cackling. And then finally they looked across the street and saw us just doubled over laughing. And then I did something similar to that when I went over to another restaurant, and I took my own order in the drive-thru because I was picking up food for everybody that we were working with, and I just ordered my own food. So when I pulled up, I was like, "Thank you for choosing blah blah blah. Can I take your order?" And they were like, "How did you do that?" And I was like, "I don't know. It was fun. It was a ghost." So.
You're torturing poor retail food workers, man. That's horrible.
It was fun though. It was too much fun, but no, it was nothing compared to yours. I did not. When I saw that question, that was not anything in my head that was gonna. That was awesome.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that one to come from me, but that's sure enough. And one day, if I ever run for political office or something, there's going to be some photos coming back of me on the dance floor pulling the dance routine.
Awesome.
So.
Well, let's get into our main topic, which is, again, working while you're in college. And so the first question we want to ask is going to sound like an inane question maybe to some, and that's what we do here. We ask those inane questions. But what are the reasons why students would work during college? I think it's important for us to identify these because it's different for everyone.
Yeah. And, the obvious, I would say, is they need money.
Yes.
Right? I mean, but it's not always just about whether you need money. It translates in the need want, right? I didn't have to work as much as I did in college, but I got used to having the money. I created a lot of I had a lot of pastimes where I wanted to buy things. I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to do those things. And I was a big saver. So it made me feel comfortable to save up some money and have that in my back pocket. So, that need want, do you have the financial resources you need? And if you do have what you need, do you have the financial resources to do the things you want? So I'd say that's number one. You need money. Other ideas? What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking, the obvious one is you have students that more or less have to work because they are responsible for someone or taking care of someone and need that finance. The finance side's the obvious one. There's some that, like I said, they want to work because like you were saying, they want to have spending money. They want to go do things. You have some that don't need to work and they don't necessarily want to work, so they just go through their entire college career not working, but just really focusing in on their academics. And then you're talking about the money side of it. You also have still dealing with finances, but another type of working, and that is you're not necessarily making a lot of money, but you're getting yourself a very big discount in college, because if you work as a student worker at the college, a lot of times your tuition goes down by an extreme amount. If you're a TA or an RA, it goes way down for tuition. So you may not be getting a lot of money or cash coming in, but you're also not having to pay a lot of cash. A lot of times you do get stipends for that as well.
Yeah, that's true. Working through college in restaurants, I got so much free food.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, at the end of the night, there's a lot of food that's cooked, and oftentimes they call it dead in the window, right? And for about 3 years, I worked in a seafood restaurant, so I ate really well that entire time, right? Because fried seafood doesn't last long in the window, and when it dies, rather than throw it in the trash, I would throw it in a to-go bin, for me after work. And of course, cold seafood, put in the refrigerator, whatever, is not the best in the world, right? It's not the fresh hot stuff, but I still got pretty good quality food throughout my experience. So it was a big deal. It saved me a lot of money.
You said something in a previous episode, I think it was one of the first episodes we were in, about eating dead food in the window. And I didn't know what that was. I thought you were eating dead food in the window. Like, I was thinking, you're walking down the street and you see just food hanging from the windows and it's just been there for weeks. I'm like, I don't think that's very healthy, man.
No, I'm using that restaurant lingo.
Okay,
right?
good. Because now that we've cleared that up.
Yeah, anybody who's worked in a restaurant knows what dead food in the window means, right? Because usually the servers are on that,
yes,
pack of dogs on a three-legged cat, right? We're tearing it apart.
So we are the podcast of cliches.
There you go. So one thing I want to say too, and I didn't bring this up to start with, a lot of students will work just to get experience towards their career.
Yeah.
They'll volunteer. They'll, in some scenarios, you call it candy striping, things like that. That's normally volunteering at a hospital or whatever. But particularly in business school, you have a lot of students that want to go into very difficult careers. I do some work in the music industry, right? Writing songs and things like that. It's a very difficult industry to get into. So if you want to learn part of that business, lots of times, particularly around areas like Nashville or Los Angeles or, places that are music epicenters, you have students that'll just work to be part of what's going on. So when they do get out of college, they can join that industry, right? Really common in the movie industry, music industry, I think literary publishing industry as well.
Well, you brought up a good point. It reminded me of something as well, and that is you also have certain businesses out there that when the student may have picked up the job in high school, and they kept the job in college, but that business itself, they say if you're a college student and you're going to college full time and you're working for us, we'll pay you. We'll pay for your college. We'll give you the scholarship. We'll pay
That's
completely.
A big deal.
That's huge. And a lot of my students do that. I'm thinking, man, not only are you getting the money for working, but they're also paying your college tuition, which is a great win-win situation.
So we've remarked before that most of the time our best or at least most dedicated students are your non-traditional students. Those are the students who aren't 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. They're older in age, right? They're coming back to college. That's their scenario. They've worked for a number of years. They joined the workforce right out of high school, or they started college and never finished because, whatever financial obligations or just the work required too much. They work for a while and the employer offers that incentive of paying to send them back to school, and they take advantage of it, which is a good deal on them. I myself, I was in the Army, and I was eligible for the 9/11 GI Bill. And when I got out of the Army, I used it, right, to go back to, I got a lot of education on that government benefit, right? So, it's not the exact same thing, but once again, you're getting non-traditional students who worked before or are using their employer to pay for their education. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like I said, I was thinking more of the traditional students that are coming from high school, because the company that stuck out to me, if I remember correctly, was Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A does that. where if you work for
Yes.
them, they'll pay for it. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Publix does the same thing.
There's, most of your Fortune 50 companies do that. I had a student working at AT&T
Mm-hmm.
recently in IT department. That was the scenario. Another student working with DeWalt, the tool
Oh, wow.
maker
Yeah.
corporation. So, I mean, I've seen it in a lot of students working with larger organizations that have formal programs there. They will pay your tuition if you're working towards a degree that is relevant to your job function.
Well, let's
Yeah.
talk about the biggest two-sided argument, I guess you would say, when it comes to working while or choosing how to work while you're in college, and that is the part-time versus full-time.
Mhm.
Part-time is not 40 hours, full-time is 40 hours. There's perks to both. There's disadvantages to both. How would you describe the decision-making process when it comes to should you work part-time or should you work full-time, or can you work part-time or can you work full-time?
Well, a lot of it's going to be timing and nature of the job, right? Full time being 40 hours. A lot of places consider full time 30 hours.
Okay.
But, and that's particularly in for legal reasons,
Mm-hmm.
right? They think of 30 hours as being meeting the requirements for certain entitlements, right?
Sure.
For certain benefits. But that being said, if you're working 30 to 40 hours a week, that is a huge time commitment. Depending on what else you have in your life with family and things like that, that's going to be a massive amount of time. And if you look at the waking hours that you have in a week, let's assume that you're counting Saturday as well, because a lot of people do take classes on Saturday or work all day on Saturday. So let's just assume 6 days a week, and you're awake from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m., right? Well, that's 15
hours,
hours. Okay. 6 days at 15 hours. I guess
yeah.
that's
90 hours?
90 hours during the week. That does not leave a lot of hours if you're working 40 hours and you have family and people to take care of in that realm to do school full time. So lots of people, if you're working full time, will pursue the part-time option for school, and vice versa. You're in school full-time, you'll pursue work part-time. Now, I have found people like myself for a couple of years who I didn't have a significant other. I didn't have much of a social life, to tell the truth. I worked pretty much full-time. And it was hard to add up the hours in the restaurant, but I was easily at least putting in 30 hours a week, and I was going to school full-time. But that was relatively easy to balance when my work was close to the school. I lived close to both of those. I didn't have any outside obligations, no pets, no family to take care of, no significant other to speak of. So I had time to do that. So it's just a balance, a combination of all the factors in life that come into play as to whether you work full time or part time. And then of course, we can talk about, I guess, in terms of need versus, how much money do I make and how much do I have to work to make my bare
Sure.
minimum salary that I need to live, right?
Well, you've mentioned too the subset of students, the subcategory of students that are non-traditional, the ones that are older in age, and most of the time they have families. So when you broke that down about 90 hours for 60 days, 90 hours for 6 days, that's the amount of time, waking hours that you have. If you take away, let's just say 35 hours that you're going to work in that week, now you're left with 55 hours. And then you're going to want to go to school, hopefully. If you're listening to this, you're probably going to school. We haven't got to the career stuff yet. But you take those hours out. But then the thing that gets me, and this is where the hard part is if you do have kids, you have to take out the hours that they are in school. Like, that's time that you could be working, or that's time that you could be in school yourself. But as a parent, you're going to want to spend time with those students, with your kids. And so it limits the amount of time that you have the ability to spend with your kids too, because they're only going to be at home for a certain amount of time. And if you're working during the time they're in school, that means you're going to be in class during the time that they're home. You're not going to have that time with them as much as you want. So it becomes even more of a problem.
Sure. And it's difficult to maintain a happy relationship with a significant other if you're never there,
Yes.
right? I mean, you're basically living two separate lives. So if you overextend yourself in that way, and let's not forget about what school requires. I suppose it is that this expectation has dwindled somewhat, but traditionally, a single credit hour, right, requires at least per week 1 to 2 study hours per credit hour for that class. So if I'm taking your accounting class,
Yep.
right, that's a 3 credit hour class. Well, in a week, I'm spending 2 to 3 hours in the class, but I'm also spending about 2 to 4 hours outside of the classroom studying, doing my homework, preparing, right? Some classes are even harder and require 3 to 4 hours per credit hour.
Yeah.
It's that you can't take all classes like
Of
that,
course
right?
not. No.
But I would dare say your organic chemistries and your, advanced level mathematics courses do require that amount of effort if you're going to do well or achieve, high level of performance in the class. So that being said, you're going to have to balance those things,
Yeah, that's the
right?
exact reason why I talk about strategy, and especially strategy when you're creating your schedule, is because you don't want 5 classes that you're going to need 3 hours per credit hour outside of the class to do studying in a single semester. You're going to want to offset those. You want to have some hard classes, some kind of easier classes, so it's not just piling up on you to the point where your time that you have left in the day after work is consumed with studying or doing projects.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I balanced my classes pretty well in college, and I went to school every summer.
Yeah, so
I
did
took
I.
additional classes every summer, and I was working, so I was able to pay for those classes. But that allowed me in several semesters to take 12 credit hours rather than 15 towards the end of my college career. And, it was a trade off. When I wasn't in class, I was working, so it allowed me to work more and it allowed me to save up money, honestly, that I needed to study abroad. Had I not had those jobs and worked so much, the studying abroad wouldn't have been an option.
One thing I want to bring up too, and it's not something that it's kind of a side thought, especially with students who have student loans. They think, okay, the student loan, I have a student loan that's paying for my college, and I'll wait until I graduate in order to start paying those back because the payment is deferred. The interest is not deferred. The interest is accruing from the moment that you get them. And so you can also use this time if you're working full time or even part time and you have excess amount of cash for the month to start paying down your student loan to get that principal down so you're not having to pay as much when you get out of college. Don't just keep pushing it to the very end because then it's just going to compound and compound. It's going to get greater and greater. If you can pay off little bit by little bit each month, it's going to make it seem a lot more doable to repay it at the very end.
Sure. Or even if it just allows you to borrow less,
Yes.
right? One point I'll make, depending on need and things like that, some student loans do not have an interest rate associated with it, right? The interest is forgiven
Mm-hmm.
at the end. Some are subsidized until you get out of college. But most people have to take some portion of unsubsidized student loans, meaning the interest runs from the
Yep.
beginning. Yeah, I mean, minimizing what you have to borrow in terms of unsubsidized loans. And also, right, like I say, being able to pay for the things you need out of pocket rather than borrowing that money in the first place is, a great option.
So let's focus in on full-time workers right now, because part-time, there's a lot of gray area. I mean, when you say part-time, it could be 5 hours, it could be 25 hours, 30 hours. Let's just assume we're talking about full-time right now. Students who have to work or they choose to work full-time. What's some advice that you can give to students that need to work full-time during college?
Well, you're going to have to be organized. You're going to have to keep a very tight schedule. And you need to recognize also when it's becoming too much. Okay. So if you can plan that out ahead of time and say, look, this is the amount of time it's going to take me to travel from one to the other. This is the amount of time I'm going to need to do each of these. This is how long I can do this for and whatnot. Then you can start making the plans in terms of how you schedule your classes, making your professor aware of what you're going through. So, if you need to miss an assignment, miss a class, make up an exam, anything like that, they understand. So everything starts with being extremely planned and prepared so that you can take the other steps necessary to make that work.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I can't say much more than that. When you said that you need to be, your time management really has to be, you know, to a top par, really, in the scheduling aspect of it. It's the discipline. It's the prioritization of things. You need to set those priorities. You need to say, okay, this is what I need to get done. And again, this is just on brand for me. I would like to prioritize, if this was me, I would like to prioritize something in there that would be fun. Again, fun doesn't mean you're going to have to travel across the world. Fun just is something that you can relax and decompress, and it's going to give you that motivation to continue forward. If you're always doing studying, working, sleeping, studying, working, sleeping, if you're always doing that, you're going to get, we've talked about this before, you're just going to get drowned out of it. I mean, it's just going to get to the point where you're done. You burnt. We talked about it in a previous episode. You're just going to get burnt out, and that's a serious problem. And so again, the prioritization of things, but also thinking of the little things that you need to keep going, I think is a huge piece for students who have to work full time during college.
Couldn't agree more. Here's one that we can bring up that's a little more technical in nature. I mean, you're an accountant, I'm a lawyer. Know your rights as an employee.
Yeah.
I see all the time employers take advantage of student employees. They treat them as interns rather than as paid employees, right? And don't get me wrong, you can pay an intern. We have a whole nother episode on what is internships and things like that. But oftentimes employers take advantage of student employees and treat them as part-time or as independent contractors, meaning they pay them not as waged employees, but as if they own their own business, right? And so they're not withholding the payroll taxes and doing the matching on the payroll taxes. Also, entitlements to health benefits, entitlements to Family Medical Leave Act or FMLA leave in the event you have some medical emergency or pregnancy or dependent who has, care needs and you're their primary caretaker, things like that. So understanding what benefits should accrue to you if you are working full time. And some people, again, it's not just the salary, they need those benefits, right? And that's why they are working full time or a certain amount of hours. But just being aware of your rights and not falling trap or victim to a scenario where basically a business is taking advantage of you, right? Because particularly now, this will fluctuate as the economy changes. But there's a lot of demand for employees now, right? You have a lot of leverage when it comes to negotiating the benefits associated with your work. Even as a part-time employee, you may be able to negotiate things like additional time off, health benefits, things like that.
Yeah, that's a big area I believe we should have a separate podcast on. I talk about it in my class. And just to kind of take it back one step, what you're talking about, your understanding of it from a legal side, from an accounting side, I really put a lot of focus on this. And in my class, and this is a plug specifically for my class because I love talking about this stuff because I think it's so vital for people, not necessarily students, but just employees in general, that you know how to calculate your net pay. Because things come up, things happen, mistakes can be made in the payroll that they may take too much out and you're not actually getting what you should be getting. And if you don't catch it, then nobody knows it. So I think everybody should be able to calculate their net pay based off of their gross.
Sure. Another financial tip I would say is make certain that in working, one, yes, you pay your bills up front, right? Your necessities. But when it comes to wants rather than needs, prioritize having some savings, some form of safety net up front. So if bad things happen, right, if your car breaks down, if you get sick and can't work for a while, things like that, so that you have something to fall back on. So before and I was very good about this. I saved a lot of money because I wanted to go on study abroads, and I'd go on study abroads or travel, right? I was able to travel a good deal during college on the money I'd saved. But if you haven't prepared like that, if you don't save up, one, opportunities are going to come, you're going to miss them, or you're going to, fall victim to hard times. Okay, so be disciplined in that way. Don't throw away your money in bars. Don't waste your money on things you don't need if you don't already have, like I say, that safety net built up.
Yeah, and the budgeting side is such a big piece. I mean, the only way to really get your finances in order is to really have a budget, a written down budget, and from a prospective sense, not a retrospective sense. So you're budgeting for the next month. You're not looking at what you spent in the prior month, and sticking to that. I mean, that's the best way. Like you're saying, have a safety net, and have your foundational things. So if you have to have rent, electricity, food, clothing, those are your big things. You need to have those. And then outside of that, you can prioritize what's the next level. But those are the biggest things.
Good advice.
What are some things that students who do work need to know about the expectations within the classroom from the professor's perspective?
Well, they need to understand that the professor has a job to do, that what they sign up for is paying for value that's delivered in education, exposure, steps toward a career path, all the things that school offers. And your needs can't come above the needs of other students. So when it comes to assignments, grading assignments, having exams, expectations for the course, the professor is not going to tailor the expectations of the course to you. Now, the professor can explain those expectations so that you have an understanding going in, so that you can tailor your schedule, so that you can understand whether you're going to be able to meet the requirements of that class or no. If not, don't take the class, right? Take a different course in its place, the same course with a different professor at a different time period with different expectations, or a different course completely, and you come back to that course at a later date or time when you can manage it. So just the understanding that the professor is going to keep the requirements of the class uniform. There is going to be no special privilege, and they're not going to tailor the class to you. You have to tailor your life to the class.
Yeah, that's when I read that story, or when I read that question, it just kind of it brought back some things where, like, my biggest focus in my class as the professor is I want to be fair to everyone. I have rules set in place, and those rules are followed for every single person. It's really hard for me to say, well, because you work full time, I'm going to give you this concession, whatever you're needing, and not give it to someone else. And then it just becomes a slippery slope. To what point do I stop? And so I tell them at the very beginning of the class period, this is what my expectations are. This is how I handle it. If you miss this, this is how you can fix it. You can make that up or some capacity. But don't expect, at least from my perspective, don't expect professors to cater to you simply because you have a job. We have a job as well. And that's what I think Jason was just saying.
And it's not that the professors don't have empathy, right? That they can't, or that they can't themselves, like in my situation, they can't sympathize with your position or where you're coming from. It's just, the greater calling of the class.
Yes.
That's the professor's job. They have to deliver the expectation of the broader community, not the expectation of individuals.
Sure. Outside of finances, what do you think are some pros and cons of working during a college? Can you think of any other ones? Experience.
Connections.
Yeah, networking.
Those are the two big ones, right? If you work for an organization, those people you work with, those are now your network, right? And particularly not in my case where I worked in restaurants, but the people you work with, right, are going to be the people who can refer you, that will go to bat for you, that will make recommendations for you. In my case, working in a restaurant, I was able to meet a lot of people that honestly I waited on, right? You're able to network in that way. So it's, the opportunity is very fleeting, right? So you have to take the opportunity to make some sort of connection that will honestly develop itself in the future. But when you're working with people every day, the relationships that you develop are just somewhat ingrained in your job, right? So again, networking, connections, things like that. And then, of course, the resume aspect, just having the experience on your resume so that it shines and looks good when you're applying for future jobs, right? Even if it's not a professional field you're working in, it still shows dedication, diligence, ability to balance multiple things, right? Working and going to school at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of on the similar path of what you're saying. That is, it gives you almost, depending on where you're working, it gives you a jump start in your career too. Like if you're working at a place that you see yourself working for as a career and you start early, I know people who they said, oh yeah, when I got when I got out of high school, I started working with this company, and the company pretty much said, once I graduate, I will move up in that company. Whereas if you waited till after you graduated to start with that company, you'd have to have that, that time in between before you can get to move up again. So having that jump start of your career is really going to be good too.
Absolutely. Tons of career benefits, tons of personal benefits, right? Helping you develop as a person. And then, the academic side of it, the one thing we haven't said, that oftentimes your job experience, when it's related to what you're studying, we see this all the time in the business field, it is going to make your classes, the material that you're learning, more engaging. You're going to get more out of it. You're going to remember it more easily. It is going to be relevant to you, so you're going to take greater interest in it as you're learning it, right? And so, that aspect.
I will say on the cons side of it, because there are so many good benefits from working during college for obvious reasons, the con is the sacrifice you have to make in order to get those benefits. There's a lot of times that you're not going to be able to do something. I remember many a times where I can remember one time where a female asked me to go on a trip with them, and of course I was single at the time, and I was working, and my work would not let me off. And you don't understand how close I was in contemplating, should I just quit? Like I thought, you know what, I'm going to go have fun this weekend. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to do the responsible thing. I'm going to stay where I'm at. But you do have those times where somebody, either friend or potential girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, they're going to ask you, hey, do you want to go do this? And you're going to have to say, I can't, I have to work, and I can't get off. There's no way I can get off. So you're going to have to sacrifice some things, but nothing worth doing is not going to come without sacrifice.
Couldn't agree more. It's all going to be a balance, right?
Absolutely. Well, this has been a good episode. I've enjoyed this one. As much as I don't like working, I don't mind talking about working. So, well, it's been fun. Jason, do you have any parting words before we head out?
Just going to remind everybody, reach out to us. Tell us about your successes. We'll celebrate them with you. And tell us what you want to hear about, because that's what we want to talk about.
Awesome. Well, until next time, we hope to see you then. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.